Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. So one of the central things that the Bad Batch is quietly doing is telling us about the fate of clone troopers after the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. I mean, this show could have just been about the band of mercenaries that survived Order 66 and had to make a way for themselves in the galaxy. That's kind of how the series has been pitched to us. But it's become so much more as the creators have delved into the politics of the post-Republic fall and also some very specific and I guess sort of adult-oriented details about what happens with the clone troopers after the fall of the Republic. I mean, if you were considering this a children's show, and yeah, you know, maybe there are some elements about it that lend themselves more to thinking of it as pitched toward comparatively younger audiences, you wouldn't expect things like the decommissioning of an army to be fodder for that type of show. But through the course of these 2 seasons, the creators of the Bad Batch have taken head on the brainwashing, for all intents and purposes, of the clones. They've addressed the necessity of deprogramming people who might be vulnerable to Order 66 programming. They dug into the finances of keeping a clone army going versus having conscripts and building up a stormtrooper army. They've tackled the politics of decommissioning an army versus funding a new army and Senate negotiations and debates over these things. They've shown us uncaring Imperial officers who are being dismissive to clone officers and just directing them to random governmental agencies that we have no hope of actually giving these clones anything useful in terms of help now that they are no longer soldiers within this empire. We've engaged in discussions about whether clone troopers who are becoming disillusioned with what's going on in the Empire are in fact traitors, or is something else bigger going on. And over the course of the season, we have been given to understand that more and more clones are becoming uncomfortable with the Empire to the point that they are defecting rather than waiting to be decommissioned. And the Empire is concerned enough about this that they are starting to consider the clones that are still in their service as potentially dangerous to them and starting to imprison them. This is some really meaty and very complex stuff. And then to have the heartbreaking moment in The Outpost, and honestly for me, The Outpost and those particular scenes with Mayday and Crosshair and the discovery that the cargo that Mayday and his troops had been protecting for more than a year was stormtrooper armor, like that was such a heartbreaking moment and has to be the emotional high point, as it were, of the series, just the strongest emotional moment. And it is all about this transition from a clone army to a stormtrooper army and about the veterans being left behind. So when Hunter and Echo are talking in Tipping Point, and Hunter says to Echo, you know, at what point is it going to be enough? You know, there's a part of me that hears that and is immediately reminded of the conversations that the Stinger Mantis crew are having in Sam Maggs' novel Battle Scars, but it also seems to play into then what's going to be happening in Jedi Survivor, the video game, as well. However, Echo makes it clear that it isn't about fighting the Empire, it's about fighting for his brothers. So if Hunter and the Bad Batch really have been using the time on Pabu to reconsider their situation and think about what really matters to them and whether they've done enough, and if not, what they want to do next, well, I think Echo is presenting a very compelling case for what they should do. And that's what I've got for you on this deeper dive into Tipping Point, which is episode 14 from season 2 of The Bad Batch, and pulling in from everything that's come before. And that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.